From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Wisconsin, home state of the late, great Gaylord Nelson, Senator Gaylord Nelson, founder of Earth Day. And that's today. Happy Earth Day. I hope you're finding a way to celebrate, to commemorate, to honor. As we speak, the big climate summit is happening. Our own President Joe hosting on our behalf. And the big news out of that summit, the Biden administration announced it will cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. At least that was the reporting heading into the summit today. Reading now from The Hill, Biden is slated to announce his emissions reduction target for 2030 on Thursday, updating the country's commitment under the Paris Agreement. Every several years, countries update their interim targets under the Global Climate Agreement, which aims to limit the planet's warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. So this is an update from Barack Obama's stated goals of between 26 and 28% by 2025. That was under the Paris Agreement. So I don't know. We'll have to do the math. It's like, is that single can of tuna a better buy than the large one or the 3-pack? Do the math on that. Just eyeballing it, yeah, it's a little more ambitious. This goal setting for reduced emissions, of course, everybody puts in their goals, their numbers, China, Europe, U.S. It's officially known as a Nationally Determined Contribution, NDC. And according to this article, much more is possible now on the mitigation front than in the Obama years due to several factors. The cost of clean energy technology has dropped. Cities, states, and companies have started taking increasingly ambitious action on climate, and public awareness and support for climate action has increased. So, up the numbers. Make the goals more ambitious. That's great. There's still this weird artificial fight, at least in my book, between the environment and jobs, as though it's some sort of compromise. You have to soften your goals in order to appease those who fear job loss. And that's where I part with established thinking for two reasons. One, proponents of more Green New Deal type policies. And by the way, Markey and Ocasio-Cortez sort of relaunched their Green New Deal just here in the last couple of days. That way of thinking tells us that jobs are aplenty if you put the right priorities in the right place. It's not a compromise at all. They go hand in hand. Plenty of jobs if you really commit to a green climate, and not only a green climate, but a green economy. And now we're talking the big sort of major shifts inherent in the Green New Deal. So there's that. And then there's my approach, which I've yet to find anybody to speak up for it. And that is that, generally speaking, overall, economic growth, economic activity need to be reduced. I don't want more people working. I don't want more production. I don't want more consumption. I mean, I understand the Green New Deal approach. There are things we need to do. I mean, we do need things. I'm not saying we all go live in caves. We need products and services. We need housing. We need transportation. And from what I can see, the Green New Deal puts their priorities in the right places. But they do kind of bend over backwards to kind of guarantee that everybody will have a job. No, in the world we need to envision for the future, everybody doesn't have to have a job. There are plenty of things to do to help each other, to help the world without the traditional paycheck and job. You and I have talked plenty, and we won't do it again here, but just as a reminder, there was a time not that long ago within the memory of a lot of folks still, you don't have to be that old to remember when one parent went out and worked a 40-hour job and supported a family of 4 or 5 or 6. And no, of course, we don't want to go back to women chained to the kitchen. No, that's not the point. The point is one job, one income could support an entire family with a living wage. Not for everybody, not for everybody. Some people still suffered, but by and large, great masses of people, an entire middle class, lived that way. And it's no longer the case. So, no, everybody doesn't have to have a job. That is just a precondition that everybody seems to agree on going into every single debate, that every adult has to have a job. I completely disagree with that. You can raise kids, you can take care of your neighbors, you can work for causes you believe in. You don't always have to be out there greasing the wheel and creating wealth and profit for the owner class. Well, we won't go down that road because we've been there plenty of times before. You know how I feel about all this. But it just continues to frustrate me that every debate about reducing emissions, every conversation about climate emergency, climate crisis, you have to come into the conversation with that preordained agreement that everybody has to work full time and that growth must continue. Economic growth cannot be questioned. So, yeah, that's my problem with every conversation. I'll try not to obsess. Well, speaking of the Green New Deal here, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator Ed Markey, this week reintroduced their Green New Deal resolution. Reading now from Reuters. Initially introduced in 2019, the non-binding resolution seeks to eliminate U.S. greenhouse gas emissions within a decade and transition the economy away from fossil fuels. So, a bit more ambitious, not 50% by 2030, but 100%. For so long, our movement toward a sustainable future has been divided with really just this false notion that we have to choose between our planet and our economy. And we decided to come together in sweeping legislation that not only rejects that notion, but creates a plan for 20 million union jobs in the United States of America, in several sectors, Ocasio-Cortez said at a news conference earlier this week. I'm trying to remember back now to the presidential primary season where Joe Biden, I think, had a couple of positive things to say about the Green New Deal, but he kept that very measured, to say the least. So nobody quite knows where President Joe Biden stands on this currently. Asked if the lawmakers wanted to go beyond what Biden has promised, Markey said, yes, we believe that this is the moment that requires us to act big, think big, have a program that matches the magnitude of the problem that we're confronted with. So there you go. Both parties here, the Joe party and the progressives, overlapping agreement, yes. Going in the same direction, yes. It's a matter of urgency, a matter of speed. And, of course, I'm going to be with Ocasio-Cortez and Markey on this one. So with this climate summit underway, the big players, of course, as you'd expect, the rich nations especially, European Union, U.S., and then the greatest polluter of all, China. Everybody's there. Everybody's represented. The European Union now, as far as their goals, I'm looking now at an AP story, they've reached a tentative climate deal to put the 27-nation bloc on a path to being climate neutral by 2050. So similar to Joe Biden's goals. Our political commitment to becoming the first climate-neutral continent by 2050 is now also a legal commitment. The climate law sets the EU on a green path for a generation, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said early Wednesday. Now that's significant. That's quite different than stated goals. So good for them. And isn't it nice that they put it that way in the realm of competition? They're almost daring the rest of the world. We're going to win this race. You try to catch us. Now, of course, I'm a cooperation guy as opposed to a competition guy, but you might get me to change my stripes if the goals are zero emissions, climate neutrality. Yeah, if you want to have a good, healthy competition toward a worthy goal, instead of competition toward how much more money you can make or how much more power you can have, I mean, that's where we usually are. Yeah, go ahead. Make it competitive. Dare each other. Double dog dare each other. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if China and the U.S. got in this all-out arms race, just full-blown competition to see who could be the most environmentally responsible, who could reduce their emissions more quickly and more significantly, who could be first to that coveted zero emissions goal? Why not? The EU deal still needs to be officially approved by member countries and by the European Parliament, although the action should be little more than a rubber stamp. So they're coming into this climate summit with a pretty nice little chip on their shoulder. That's pretty good. Ultimately, both Washington and Brussels are aiming to go climate neutral by mid-century. Scientists say this goal needs to be achieved to keep average global temperatures from rising above 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Now, a recent headline that I found interesting: power companies, the big boys, are urging Biden to set standards to reduce emissions by 80% by 2030. His goal, as stated today at the summit, 50%. So that's quite a difference. Reading from Rolling Stone here from a couple days ago. As President Biden prepares to announce a U.S. emissions pledge, a group of electricity companies sent him a letter urging the president to set a clean energy standard goal of reducing the industry's carbon emissions by 2030. The coalition of 13 power companies proposed a goal similar to one set by environmental advocacy group Evergreen Action in February. To achieve the goal of net zero emissions, power companies would use a number of reduction strategies, such as switching to wind, solar-generated, or nuclear energy. There are also proposals for capturing emissions from coal and natural gas plants so they don't enter the atmosphere, though these technologies have not yet been demonstrated on the scale of solar or wind power. So think with me here for a second. Why are these great power companies, some of the largest in the world, coming together to lobby the president to make his goals more ambitious, 80% emissions reduction by 2030, as opposed to 50%? This is a part of the story that I find very interesting. You know me. They're all big evil corporations, right? I never have anything good to say about them. But they do know their business. I never said they didn't know their business. No, they definitely know their business. And from everything we've seen in recent years, with the auto industry getting out ahead of public policy regarding cleaner cars, and now this headline: power companies, providers of electricity, insisting that we must go cleaner quicker. I'm going to defer to you on this one. Do you know what's going on here? Are we being played here? Are we suckers? I don't know. We are usually in the role of just automatically rejecting anything the big companies have to say. Well, it's like with anybody, friend or enemy or neutral. If you have a shared interest, you got to work together. Sure, it's fun being a radical lefty and hollering for proposals that make other people uncomfortable. There's a certain pleasure in that. But that's not where I live. I get 1,000 times more pleasure if we can actually make some progress, some real progress, meaningful progress. And if these big old CEOs of these big old companies know something that I don't know, and it results in reduced emissions and clean energy in a hurry, I'm on board. But again, I defer to you. You tell me what I'm missing. If I'm missing something, and if I'm being played by these guys, please let me know. I have yet to discover what that might be, if anything. If there's any skullduggery going on, I don't know what it is. And then just one more note on the climate summit. China's going to be there. Talk about cooperating with your natural enemies. I have very little good to say about the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping. It's an authoritarian oligarchic system. I'm no fan of Chinese politics. But China has announced, China, the world's largest emitter of greenhouse gases, has announced that President Xi Jinping would attend the virtual summit despite deep tensions with the U.S., reading now from Axios. So that's good. And apparently, just last week, I don't have that story in front of me, but there were some high-level meetings between China and the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, I believe, in on those meetings. So as it regards this common goal here, what ought to be, and of course what absolutely has to be a global effort, very happy to see Chinese-U.S. cooperation. And again, like I said earlier, if it could become a big old competition, who can be better, faster, how great would that be? Let me go back here on this Axios article. Yeah, it's a pretty high-profile deal. 40 heads of state are attending, including Vladimir Putin, President Jair Bolsonaro of Brazil. That guy. Got to rein that guy in or get rid of him. The lineup also includes high-profile names such as Pope Francis. No kidding. Bill Gates. The heads of NATO and the World Bank. Corporate executives and more. Okay, so I just got depressed again. The World Bank, corporate executives, Bill Gates. No, I like Pope Francis. I'm fine with him being there. He's a great voice for the environment. Pope Francis is he's got that really bad sort of Catholic thing going, because after all, he is the Pope. So regarding the gays, he's not so great. But when it comes to business, when it comes to the overreach of the moneymakers, when it comes to saving the environment, this guy's a bona fide lefty. Pope Francis. But, yeah, we don't need to hear from Bill Gates. We don't need to hear from corporate executives. They all just need to stay home and take their orders, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to climate. The World Bank, give me a break. The White House is trying to reassert U.S. leadership on the climate issue and encourages other countries to make commitments to slash emissions before 2030. Good, fine, okay. On a call with reporters this morning, let's see, I guess reading here, that would be yesterday morning, officials laid out the summit agenda, but did not say what additional commitments the U.S. will be making on the emissions or climate finance front. However, it is widely expected the U.S. will commit to reducing emissions by at least 50% below 2005 levels by 2030, which would put the country near the top of the pack when it comes to emissions targets. Okay, we mentioned that earlier. We expect action at this meeting. We're looking for people to make announcements, to raise their ambition, to indicate next steps that they intend to be taking to help solve the climate problem, and to work collectively to do so, a senior administration official told reporters. The administration is also looking to use the summit to showcase its all-of-government approach to climate. The event will include not only the heads of environmental agencies, but also officials like the Secretary of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence. Now, here's something where I want to say, yes, yes, bully, bully. I'm very happy with the Biden approach when he understands the interconnectedness of things. I'm very happy that he incorporates his 4 pillars. We always talk about that here. Right from the campaign, his 4 pillars were COVID, economic inequality, systemic racism, and the climate crisis. And when he talks about one, he talks about the others. He understands the connections. So, yes, bringing in national intelligence, national defense into an environmental summit, that's exactly the right attitude. So, full praise for the Biden approach. I don't recall any other president ever really understanding this, let alone acting on it. So I'm very pleased with the 4-pillar approach. Good for President Joe on that count. Biden administration officials can use the deal to show that other countries are acting as President Biden presses Congress for huge new investments and unveils a non-binding target to steeply cut U.S. emissions this decade. Yeah, I still don't like that non-binding. That's in every story. It just is peppered in all of these stories. Oh, well, it's non-binding. It's non-binding. Hell, let's make it binding. Let's up the pressure a little bit. Let's make commitments. Let's put these in the form of treaties, of international agreements. Say, yes, we're doing it. There's no turning back. This is not a non-binding agreement. This is a binding agreement, and here are the consequences if we don't meet our goals. And I suppose any consequences you can name can't be any worse than the natural consequences if we don't meet our goals. So I'm not crazy about this always non-binding stuff. So that's why this European Commission goal, the fact that it is binding, it is set in law, that's a great step. I wish the rest of the world would follow suit on that. Separately, the UK announced tougher emissions goals this week, targeting a 78% cut by 2035 compared to 1990 levels. So yeah, all these crazy numbers that can get a little confusing. But yeah, I'd love to see an arms race. I'd love to see a numbers race. Yeah, get competitive. Why not? The U.S. goes into the summit with a credibility gap after former President Donald Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement. Biden moved to rejoin on his first day in office. Okay, so good information there from Axios. Thank you. And it's worth remembering that Joe Biden has, as promised, done unilaterally what he can right out of the gate. Of course, he had that flurry of executive orders in the first week or two in office, most notably rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, nixing the Keystone XL pipeline. In his very first week in office, through executive order, he directed federal officials to protect 30% of the country's lands and ocean waters by 2030, part of an effort to slow the wildlife extinction crisis and curb global warming. Reading now from biologicaldiversity.org. This is a crucial step to stopping the wildlife extinction crisis, which threatens the future of all life on our planet. Kieran Suckling, Executive Director of the Center for Biological Diversity. We've got to preserve the most biologically rich ecosystems to have any hope of bringing nature back from the brink. Human activity got us to this heartbreaking point, and we're grateful the Biden administration will address this global crisis by working to protect 30% of the nation's lands and oceans by 2030. Under the President's order, the Interior Department will determine how to measure the country's progress toward the 3030 goal and outline steps to achieve it. Federal officials also will support local, state, private, and tribal conservation and restoration efforts and work to improve access to nature for low-income communities and communities of color. 3/4 of the planet's lands and 2/3 of its oceans have been heavily altered by humans. Habitat loss and degradation remains the largest driver of extinction in the United States and around the world. The U.S. loses a football field worth of natural area every 30 seconds to human development, severely affecting wildlife, fresh water, and clean air. And that's where I'd like to finish today and have us think about. It's very easy. It's so easy to get swept up in the numbers, especially when you're talking about reduced emissions. That's always the big headline. It's so easy to just picture this sort of default world, all of this activity, all of the factories, and let's make them cleaner, all of the consumption, and let's make that greener. But it doesn't fundamentally question that default position of hyperactivity. And it seems backwards, but when we think about and talk about emissions all the time, we have that default picture in our minds of what the world is. Activity, economic activity, its production and its consumption. And I think it does us great existential harm to think of the world that way, to have that be our default image. The image in our heads of the world ought to be the natural world. We are animals on this planet, after all. And to remember that conservation of land, biodiversity, halting extinction, these are not grand, romantic dreams. We've got to put these right at the center of the conversation and right in the center of our minds as we grapple with how we go forward. So I think that's just a nice little reminder that Joe Biden did right out of the gate. He signed executive orders. He's on the right side of most of this. Yes, he's compromising. Yes, he's corporate friendly. But it's good to highlight some of these more positive stories and to know that he's capable of doing the right thing. He is. And I don't want to put the focus too much on one person, on the President of the United States. That's not how the world ought to work. One person shouldn't have all that power, but the fact is he does have power. And the fact that he's capable of doing the right thing, and he's capable of listening and being persuaded. In my more critical moments of Joe Biden, I say he doesn't have original ideas. Okay, there's a positive way you can spin that too. He listens, he changes, he goes with the flow. He's able to be convinced of things. When I'm being critical of him, that's a weak characteristic. But there's another way you can look at that. He is open. And if we get the right people around him and push him in the right direction, he can be a great asset. But I love that reminder that it's not just about economic activity. It's about what we tend to think of more romantically. Just the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and the moon up above and a thing called love. Yeah, we can be a little more touchy-feely about loving the earth. Why not? On this of all days, on Earth Day. We are animals on this planet. And in fact, that brings me to my final article here. I've been jumping around. I want to recommend this, and I'm going to post it on the Facebook page, Charles Purcell Facebook page. It's called The Joy of Being Animal. Human exceptionalism is dead. For the sake of our own happiness and the planet, we should embrace our true animal nature. It's by Melanie Challenger, who's a researcher on the history of humanity and the natural world and environmental philosophy. So, scholar, author, environmentalist. I'll read just a little bit to you. We know we're animals related to all other life on our planet. We've also learned much about cognition, including the uneasy separation between instinct and intention, and the investment of the whole body in thought and action. As such, we might expect attitudes to have changed, but that isn't the case. We still live with the belief that humans, in some essential way, aren't really animals. We still cling to the possibility that there's something extra biological that delivers us from the troubling state of being an organism trapped by flesh and death. Many of us still deny that human actions are the result of our animal being, instead maintaining that they're the manifestation of reason. We think our world into being, and that's sometimes true. The trouble comes when we think our thoughts are our being. If we can build a better relationship with our own reality, and indeed a better relationship with other animals, we'll be on the road to recovery. I just enjoyed this article and I thought I'd share it with you. And I think it's very apropos here on this Earth Day to think about ourselves and our relationships with the planet and everybody we share the planet with. Yes, we have to get into the dirt of politics, and we have to make tough choices, and we got to get in there and battle. But also, let's get into the dirt of our gardens and be aware of the dirt under our feet. And let's go into these political debates with a grounding in who we really are and what's really important. All right. Happy Earth Day to you and yours. I love you. I'm Charles Purcell.